The wind howled through the dead forest. Snowflakes danced like ghosts in the freezing air. The sun had already disappeared behind dark clouds, and the world felt cold, empty, and forgotten. Jake, a lone human trader, moved carefully through the snow-covered path. He had come to this abandoned colony looking for old scrap, something to sell, something to survive on. He didn't expect to find anyone alive out here. This place was marked dead on every map. But then, he saw something. It was small, barely moving, a shape half buried in the snow. At first, Jake thought it was a broken robot. But as he got closer, he stopped breathing for a moment. It was a child, an alien girl. Her skin was pale blue, covered in frost. Her thin arms were wrapped around her chest, shivering. Her feet were purple, almost black from the cold. She wasn't crying. She wasn't talking. She just sat there, shaking, blinking slowly, like she was trying to stay awake. Jake dropped to his knees. Hey kid, can you hear me?" he said, reaching out to her. The girl looked up. Her eyes were strange, large and silver, full of fear, but she didn't speak. She just lifted a trembling finger and pointed behind him. Jake turned fast, his hand already near his sidearm. But it wasn't danger. It was her mother. She was crawling, barefoot, thin as a skeleton. Her clothes were torn, hanging off her body. Her hair was frozen in clumps. She looked like she hadn't eaten in weeks. Her lips were cracked, and her eyes were glassy. But she crawled forward anyway, reaching for her daughter. Jake ran to her. "Don't move, don't try to stand," he said. "You're both freezing." The woman looked up at him, breathing heavily. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out. Jake leaned in to hear. "Just one hot meal," she whispered, her voice shaking. "For her." Then she reached for the torn cloth at her chest, pulling it down slowly. Her hands were trembling from weakness, not shame. "I'll be yours. Tonight, just feed her." Jake froze. He stared at her in disbelief. She wasn't begging for herself. She didn't ask for food. She didn't cry or scream. She just made a quiet, desperate offer to give herself for nothing, in exchange for a meal for her child. Jake's heart twisted. He looked at the child again. Her little body still sat in the snow, her legs too frozen to move. Without another word, he took off his coat and wrapped it around the child. He picked her up gently, holding her close to his chest. Then he turned back to the mother. "Come on," he said. "I've got shelter nearby. You're not dying today." The woman didn't argue. She couldn't. She simply nodded, her eyes full of tears, but not for herself. For her child. Jake carried the girl and helped the mother walk. Every few steps, she stumbled. Twice she almost collapsed, but Jake kept going, supporting her with one arm, holding the girl with the other. They reached his small outpost, a converted cargo pod buried in snow, but warm inside. As soon as they entered, the heat hit them like fire. The girl whimpered softly, her eyes blinking fast at the sudden warmth. Jake set her down on a soft blanket near the heater. Then he rushed to get a thermal blanket and wrapped the mother as well. He opened a heating pack of emergency rations, something with protein and steam, and placed it before the child. She hesitated, then looked at her mother. The woman nodded. Weakly. Only then did the child reach out and take the food. She ate like she hadn't tasted anything in days. Jake watched, saying nothing. The mother tried to stand, pulling at her clothes again. Jake raised his hand. "Stop." She looked confused. "I didn't bring you here for that," he said. "You don't owe me anything." The woman didn't speak. She just stared at him like he was something she didn't understand. After a long silence, she whispered, "Why?" Jake shrugged. "Because your daughter was freezing to death, and so were you." The mother lowered her eyes. Then she said something quietly in a language he didn't know, but it sounded like a prayer. Jake brought her a cup of warm water. "Drink this. Rest. We'll talk later." As she took the cup in both hands, her fingers shaking, Jake noticed something strange, thin, glowing lines on her skin. He wasn't sure what they were, but he didn't ask. Not yet. He just sat across from them, watching the little girl eat. Slowly, as if afraid it might be a dream, the mother leaned back, weak but alive. Her eyes stayed on her daughter, and her lips moved silently. A name, maybe? A wish Jake didn't know who they were or where they came from, but deep inside, he knew one thing for sure. They weren't just lost travelers. They were running from something, something big, and now they were in his shelter. Jake didn't sleep. That night, he sat on a small metal chair near the heater, watching the two figures curled up on the floor. The child lay under his thickest blanket, her arms around her chest, finally breathing steadily. The mother lay beside her, still trembling. But her color had started to return. The frost on her skin was melting, leaving pale blue skin beneath. Jake had seen a lot during his travels across alien colonies, broken ships, lost cargo, dying animals. But never anything like this. He kept hearing the woman's voice in his head. "Just one hot meal for her. I'll be yours tonight." He couldn't forget the way she said it. No begging, no tears. Just a quiet surrender. She wasn't selling herself. She was offering her last piece of dignity to keep her child alive, and that made Jake feel something he hadn't felt in a long-time anger, not at Herb, at whatever world made her believe that was her only option. By morning, the child was awake. She didn't speak much, just pointed at the food packet Jake had left beside her. She touched it like it was something magical. Her hands were still shaking, but she had color in her face now. Jake gave her another small meal. Carefully, he watched her eat. "Do you have a name?" he asked softly. The girl blinked at him. Then she glanced at her mother, who had just started to wake up. The mother slowly sat up, clutching the blanket to her chest. Her eyes found Jake, but this time, they didn't hold fear. Just quiet confusion. "You're still here," she whispered. Jake raised an eyebrow. "Of course I am. You didn't leave, or lock the door." "I don't make deals like that," he said. The woman looked down at her hands. She whispered something in her own language again, then spoke in broken English. "I am Vetra." Jake nodded. "And your daughter Luma?" Jake smiled a little. "Pretty name." Vetra didn't smile back. She looked at him like he was something rare, something strange. She looked around the shelter, then at the heater, the food, the roof. Above her head. Then she finally said the words Jake had been waiting for. "Why help us?" Jake sighed. "Because you needed help." "No one helps us," she said. "Not without price." Jake leaned forward. "Well, I'm not, no one." Vetra didn't answer. She just stared at him again. Then she tried to stand. Her legs wobbled, but she managed. She reached for the corner where he kept his storage, pulling at her torn clothes. Again, Jake stood quickly and blocked her path. "Stop," he said firmly. "You don't owe me anything. Not food, not work, and definitely not that." Vetra looked confused. "But you saved us. You gave food, warmth." "I must give." Jake shook his head. "I didn't do it for trade. I did it because your child's feet were turning purple and you were about to die in the snow." Vetra froze. Then, slowly, she sat back down, her hands shaking in her lap. Silence filled the room. Jake sat across from her again. "What happened to you?" Vetra looked at Luma, who was now curled up beside the heater. Then she whispered, "We ran? From what?" "Hunters." Jake tensed. "Hunters. Bad ones. Not for food. For money. For bloodline." Jake narrowed his eyes. Now that didn't sound like regular bounty hunters. It sounded worse. "Who are you?" he asked. Slowly, Vetra looked away. No one now. Just Mother. Jake didn't push further. Not yet. Instead, he stood and grabbed 2 new blankets. He handed one to Vetra and gently placed the other over the sleeping child. Then he handed her a mug of hot water and sat down again. "You can stay here a few days," he said, "but after that, we'll need a plan." Vetra stared at the cup in her hand. Then, after a long moment, she whispered, "Thank you." It was the first real thing she had said, and her voice sounded less broken now. That night, Jake worked on fixing his long-range radio. It had been damaged during a storm, and now he needed it more than ever. If hunters were truly after these, too, he wanted to be ready. While he worked, Vetra quietly cleaned the small shelter. She moved slowly but with care. She wiped the dust, folded the blankets, even washed the child's face with warm water. She didn't speak much, but she didn't try to offer herself again. She was just grateful, and Jake didn't say it out loud, but deep inside. He felt something strange blooming, not pity, not responsibility, something else. Something like trust, or maybe hope. The next morning, the snowstorm outside had calmed. But inside Jake's shelter, something else was slowly warming up trust. Vetra had started to speak more. Her voice was still soft, careful, but she no longer looked like she expected pain. Every time someone spoke, Luma, the child, stayed close to her mother, though she now smiled a little when Jake handed her food. She even giggled once when he accidentally spilled water on his own boots. That small laugh was the first sound of joy he'd heard since they arrived. It made him pause and smile too. "She's getting stronger," Jake said as he crouched beside them. Vetra nodded, brushing Luma's fine hair away from her face. "Because of you." Jake shook his head. "Because you carried her through that storm. I only gave her heat." Vetra didn't reply. Her eyes held something behind them, long memory, maybe sorrow. Jake didn't press. But the silence between them no longer felt heavy. It felt like quiet peace. Later that day, Jake decided they both needed more than just food. They needed to clean up. He had an old portable bath unit connected to the water recycler. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. He set up the water heater, filled the tub, and turned toward Vetra. "Hot water's ready. You and Luma can take a bath. It'll help." Vetra looked unsure. She had bathed in frozen rivers before, but this, warm water, offered without demand. It felt strange. Still, she nodded. Jake handed her clean towels, a small bottle of soap, and turned away to give them privacy. He didn't look back. He just sat by the door, pretending to check his tools while steam filled the air. From behind the curtain, he heard soft splashes and quiet whispers in a language he didn't understand. Luma laughed softly again, and Vetra's voice sounded lighter now, but then something happened. There was silence. Then a loud, sharp intake of breath from Vetra. "Is everything okay?" Jake called out. No answer. He stood, unsure whether to step closer. Then Vetra's voice came, weak and shaken. You should see." Jake hesitated, then stepped to the edge of the curtain. Vetra stood wrapped in the towel, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. But what caught his attention wasn't the water or the steam. It was her back, glowing, faint. Golden symbols pulsed on her skin like living tattoos. They looked ancient, beautiful, but strange. They had been hidden under layers of dirt and cold. But now, in the warmth, they had awakened. "What is that?" Jake whispered, staring at the markings. Vetra looked away. "My shame? No," Jake said slowly. "That doesn't look like shame. That looks like something powerful. Didn't answer. But Luma peeked from behind her mother, still drying her face, and said something in a clear, soft voice. Not broken like before. Not scared. Jake blinked. What did she say? He asked. Vetra looked surprised. She said, You are different. Jake chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. But something about Luma's tone stayed in his head. It was the way she spoke, as if she was used to being heard. As if she was used to being someone important. He stepped back to give them space. When they finished and came out dressed in warm clothes he had given them, Jake noticed how different they looked now. Not like starving wanderers. Not like ghosts from the snow. They looked like something more. He sat down again, not ready to ask too much, but needing to understand. Vetra, he said, carefully. What are those marks? She sat across from him and pulled the towel tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes dropped to the floor. They are birthmarks, she whispered, but not from nature, from bloodline. Jake leaned forward. Royal Vetra didn't answer, but that silence, it said everything. Jake felt the air in the room shift. You're not just a runaway. Vetra nodded once, very slowly. I was a consort to a prince. He died. His enemies came for me and my child. We ran. Jake stared at her, stunned. So Luma is the last of his line, she said softly. If they find her, they will take her. Not to raise her. Not to honor her. Just to remove her from the bloodline. Jake's mouth went dry. That was why she had offered herself for a meal. That was why she never spoke of her past. She wasn't just a lost mother. She was protecting a royal child from execution. And now they were here. In his shelter, Jake rubbed his face. You need protection. Real protection. Vetra looked up at him, fear returning to her eyes. Will you give us to them? Jake met her gaze. No, I'm going to keep you both safe. I don't know how yet, but I will. Vetra stared at him, surprised. She whispered, You don't know what danger you're calling? Jake stood. Doesn't matter. You trusted me when you had nothing. Now I trust you. And just like that, something unspoken passed between them. Not love. Not yet, but something almost as rare a bond. 3 days passed. The snow outside had started to melt under the pale winter sun, but the cold still lingered in the air. Inside the small shelter, things were quiet, almost peaceful. Luma had regained her strength. Her cheeks had color now, and she followed Jake around, curious about everything he touched. Vetra stayed silent most of the time, but her eyes no longer held the same fear. She moved with slow grace, her body still weak but no longer shaking. Jake had fixed the radio, though he hadn't turned it on yet. A part of him feared what might come if he did. If anyone out there was still hunting for Vetra and Luma, the signal might be enough to alert them, but keeping it off forever wasn't an option. He needed supplies, fuel, food, tools. That morning, as Jake boiled water for tea, he heard Luma laugh. She was trying to stack empty cans like towers, and when they fell, she clapped her hands and giggled again. Jake smiled. You've got good balance. Vetra sat nearby, watching her daughter. She hasn't laughed like that in many seasons. Jake looked over. She's safe here. You both are. Vetra didn't answer. She looked out the small window. Her face suddenly still. Jake followed her gaze. Dot in the distance far beyond the trees. A small black dot moved through the sky. At first, he thought it was just a bird. But then, it grew larger and faster. Jake stood slowly. Get away from the window. Vetra pulled Luma close and crouched behind a wall. Jake grabbed his binoculars and looked again. It wasn't a bird. It was a ship, small, fast, and marked with symbols he didn't like. Patrol craft, he muttered. Low orbit. His heart started to pound. He had seen ships like that before. They weren't peaceful explorers. They were trackers, slavers, sometimes bounty hunters. And they didn't land for friendly visits. The ship circled once, then slowed. Down dot, Jake turned to Vetra. They're looking for something. Vetra's face went pale. They found us. Jake didn't waste time. He grabbed his pack, stuffed it with supplies, then turned to her. We have to go. Now? She stood, holding Luma tightly. Jake helped them outside. The snow was softer now, easier to walk through. He led them through a back trail, one he had used for collecting scrap. It led to the edge of the forest then. Down into the old tunnels beneath the hills. They moved quickly, but quietly. Avoiding open ground behind them, the ship landed with a deep mechanical roar. They didn't look back. The entrance to the tunnel was hidden behind an old mining station. Jake kicked the panel twice, then pulled the hidden latch. The door opened with a rusty groan. Inside, he whispered, they entered the darkness. Inside, the air was damp and cold, but safe. Jake turned on a small light strapped to his jacket. The tunnels stretched deep into the hills he had explored. Them before. They led to the ruins of an old alien power station, abandoned and forgotten. Perfect for hiding. As they walked deeper, Vetra clutched Luma close. They won't stop, she whispered. Jake nodded. I know, but they'll have to get through me first. She looked at him, unsure whether to believe that. But the way he walked, determined, steady, gave her a strange comfort. Far above them, back at the shelter, the ship's crew searched the area. One of them found the bed still warm. Another found the half-eaten meal. Recent activity, the leader growled. They were just here. Do we engage? Scan the area first. Then burn the shelter. Leave a message. The ground above shook as fire exploded through the walls of Jake's home. Everything he had built was gone in seconds, but he didn't know that yet. Deep in the tunnels, Jake led Vetra and Luma to an old chamber. It was dark, but dry. Safe for now. He set down the bag and handed Luma a heat pack. She hugged it close, her eyes wide. Vetra sank to the floor. Her voice cracked. They're not bounty hunters. Jake looked at her. Then who? She hesitated. They're blood seers. Jake blinked. That was a name he hadn't heard in years. You mean the ones who track royal lines? Gene readers? Vetra nodded. They smell royal blood, even in children. Jake's throat tightened. So they're after Luma, Vetra whispered. They were always after her, not me. I was just in the way. Jake sat down, breathing heavily. He had thought he was just helping a mother and child survive the cold. But this was more than that. This was war. And somehow, he had become part of it. The tunnels were quiet now, but the fear remained. Jake sat with his back against the cold metal wall, his eyes locked on the tunnel entrance. He could still hear the fire from above, echoing in his mind, the sound of his shelter being destroyed. Everything he had built, everything he had saved, turned to ash in seconds. Vetra sat close by, holding Luma tightly against her chest. The child had fallen asleep, her head resting on her mother's shoulder, her little fingers still clinging to the blanket Jake had given her. He glanced at them and whispered, "We can't stay here long." Vetra nodded. "They'll search the tunnels." Jake reached into his bag and pulled out a map-handled one, half-torn, with markings from the abandoned mining operation. He traced a path with his finger. There's a lower shaft, leads to a collapsed chamber. I haven't explored it much, but it might take us close to the old ruins. Vetra's eyes narrowed. Ruins. Jake nodded. An ancient power station, dead for centuries. No one goes there anymore. It's full of traps and dust. That's exactly why it might save us. Vetra didn't hesitate. Let's go. They packed quickly. Jake led the way, flashlight beam dancing across rusted walls and broken supports. The deeper they went, the colder it got, but cold didn't matter now. Staying ahead of the bloodseers did, after nearly 2 hours of walking through narrow, slippery paths. They reached a sealed door. Jake kicked the side panel, then twisted the old manual release. The door groaned, then slid open halfway, just enough to crawl through. Inside, the air felt heavier, older. The walls were no longer just metal. They were marked with strange lines, glowing faintly beneath the dust. Ancient writing. Luma, still in her mother's arms, stirred and opened her eyes. She looked at the walls and smiled. Jake noticed. What is it? Vetra looked down at her daughter, surprised. Luma placed her hand on one of the glowing symbols. The wall shimmered. A section slid open, revealing a hidden passage. Jake stepped back in shock. How did she do that? Vetra was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke softly. Royal blood speaks to ancient systems. Jake looked at Luma again. The small child's eyes were wide, but not scared. She seemed calm, as if she belonged. Here, the new passage led them into a massive circular chamber. The walls were covered in lights, dim, flickering, but alive. In the center stood a raised platform with a control ring. Jake whistled. This place still has power. Not just power, Vetra whispered. Memory? She walked slowly toward the center with Luma beside her. As they approached, the ring lit up, scanning their faces. Then a soft, deep voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in a language Jake didn't understand. Vetra answered in the same tongue. The platform responded by unlocking a side panel. Inside were small glowing cubes. What is all this? Jake asked. Vetra took one of the cubes and held it gently. This is the heart of my people, a memory archive, lost for generations. Jake was speechless. How? How did you know it was here? I didn't, she replied. But the blood? Remembers. My child remembers. Jake felt a chill, not from the cold, but from something greater. This wasn't just a hiding place. This was something powerful, a piece of history, and maybe a key to something even bigger. Then they heard footsteps echoing through the tunnels. Jake grabbed his weapon and motioned for silence. Vetra clutched Luma and backed into the shadows. 3 figures entered from the main tunnel, dark armor, glowing red visors. Bloodseers. Jake raised his blaster and fired once, just enough to draw attention away from Vetra and Luma. The shot hit the wall and sparked, lighting the room for a second. Run, he shouted. Vetra moved quickly, holding her daughter tightly. As she slipped into a narrow side tunnel, the bloodseers turned toward Jake. He ducked behind a column and fired again, this time hitting one of them in the arm. The figure dropped, but the others moved fast. Jake threw a small stun grenade and dashed after Vetra, his heart pounding. They didn't stop until they reached a sealed chamber deep underground. Vetra used one of the cubes to unlock the door, and it closed behind them with a heavy clang. Inside, the lights came on slowly, revealing a large room full of sealed pods, old tech and control panels still blinking. Jake leaned against the door. Breathing hard, Vetra stood nearby, her arms around Luma, her face pale but calm. Jake looked around. What is this place? Vetra answered with a voice both tired and strong. This was once a royal safe house in case of civil war. Only the royal family could enter. Jake stared. And now, you're back. She nodded slowly. But I'm not alone anymore. Jake met her eyes, and for a moment, the fear faded. This wasn't just a chase anymore. It was the beginning of something bigger. The wind blew stronger now. It carried the scent of smoke, metal, and danger. Rourke stood at the edge of the ruined station, gripping his rifle tighter than ever. Down the slope, he could see them, dark figures moving like shadows, their armor reflecting the fading light. The bone arrows had returned. And this time, they weren't just scouts. They were coming to finish what they started. Beside him, Luma stood silently, her soul light held close to her chest. The glow had dimmed slightly, as if it was saving its strength for what was coming. But she wasn't afraid, not the way she had been before. Her hands didn't shake. Her feet didn't move. She stood like someone who had already made peace. With her decision behind them, the alien mother sat up against a broken wall, holding a stun pistol. She was still weak, but her eyes were sharp again. Focused, she had died once and come back. She wouldn't go easily again. "They're spreading out," Rourke said, "flanking both sides." "How many?" the mother asked, her voice quiet, but steady. "At least 20, she nodded. "Then we hold." Rourke glanced at her, surprised. "You're ready to fight." "I was ready the day they came for my child," she said, "and I'm still ready now." Luma looked between the two of them. "What if we don't win?" "We will," Rourke said. She stared at him. "How can you be sure?" "Because I made a promise," he said, "and I don't break those." Luma walked closer to him. "Even if it means dying." He didn't answer immediately. Then he knelt down in front of her so they were eye to eye. "Listen to me. Luma, the galaxy is full of people who want to take things from your peace, your safety, your future. But I'm not one of them. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to live, to grow, to see what the stars really look like when you're free." She blinked, her throat tight. "You don't even know me that well." He smiled. "Know enough." Her voice cracked. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you're the first person in years who gave me a reason to fight again," he said. "And because you called me something no one's ever called me before." Luma looked down, Dad. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, that." She stepped closer and wrapped her arms around his neck. He held her tightly, ignoring the pain in his wounded arm. "I meant it, you know," she whispered. "I don't want just a protector. I want a dad." "You've got one now?" he said, his voice rough. Behind them, the mother watched with quiet eyes. A small smile touched her lips, even through the pain. "You're good with her?" She said. "I'm trying," Rourke said, standing. "She's never had anyone but me," the mother added. "And now, she'll have someone even if I don't make it." "You're going to make it," he said. A sudden loud clang echoed through the station. Something heavy hitting metal. They were here. Rourke rushed to the side window and aimed his rifle. The first bone arrow stepped into view. Helmeted, armored, holding a long energy spear. Rourke fired. The shot hit the soldier square in the chest, dropping him instantly. Another appeared. Then another. Shots flew in both directions. The mother took a shot with the stun pistol, hitting a soldier climbing the wall. Rourke reloaded, ducked, rolled, fired again, but they were closing in fast. A blast hit the edge of the station, throwing dust and fire into the air. Luma screamed and dropped behind a broken console. Covering her head, the soul light fell from her hand and rolled across the floor. Rourke dove after it, grabbing it just before another shot burned the ground beside it. He tossed it back to her. "Hold on to it." "I am," she cried, gripping it again. The stone glowed brighter than before. "Something's happening," she shouted. The light grew, pushing outward like a wave. The enemy soldiers paused, shielding their eyes. The soul light rose slightly into the air, above Luma's hands, spinning, glowing gold and white dot. And then it spoke, not in words, but in energy. A voice that was not a voice. A presence that filled the air. Every light inside the station grew brighter. Every pulse of the soul light seemed to slow time, and the bone arrows stopped. Frozen one by one, their weapons powered down. Their bodies stiffened, their armor cracked. Then they dropped, unmoving, silenced. Luma's eyes were wide. "I didn't mean to." "You saved us," Rourke said, panting. Again, the light faded. The soul light dropped back into her. Hands dim but warm. Silence. No more attackers. Only the sound of breathing, rain, and something new. Rotors in the distance. Rourke looked up. "Evac's here." The mother closed her eyes, letting out a shaky breath. "It's over." Luma turned to Rourke. "We can go now." He smiled. "Yeah, we can go." She took his hand, not just because she was scared, but because it was her father's hand now, and she never wanted to let go. The transport ship hovered just above the ridge, its engines humming softly like a lullaby for the wounded. Its landing lights cast long beams through the broken trees and scattered enemy bodies, bathing the scene in pale gold. The wind kicked up dust and fallen leaves as the hatch opened with a sharp hiss. Rourke stood at the edge of the ruined station, shielding his eyes from the light. Behind him, Luma held her mother's hand as they both leaned against the wall. The fight was over. But none of them had truly relaxed. Not yet. 3 medics jumped down from the ship and rushed toward them with stretchers and supplies. One of them spotted Rourke. "Cale Rourke." He nodded. "That's me. These 2 civilians. One's wounded. The others?" He looked at Luma, who was still clutching the soul light close to her chest. "She's the reason we're all still alive." The medics gently placed the alien mother on a stretcher. She winced, but didn't cry out. She was awake now, fully aware of everything around her. Her hand never left Luma's until they reached the ship. Luma looked up at Rourke, unsure. He reached out his hand. "Come on." She took it, and they stepped aboard together. Inside the ship, the world felt different. Clean air, steady walls, no gunfire, no smoke. Just safety for the first time in days. Rourke collapsed onto a seat beside the window and let out a long breath. Luma sat across from him, the soul light resting in her lap. It pulsed gently, but didn't glow brightly anymore. A medic approached. "You'll be taken to Ark Ship Solace. It's fully equipped. You'll be safe there." Rourke repeated quietly. The word almost didn't feel real. The ship rose into the air. As they left the ridge behind, Luma pressed her face to the window, watching the jungle shrink below. Then she turned to Rourke. "Do you think they'll stop chasing us?" He looked at her. "Maybe not, but they'll never take you. Not while I'm breathing." She nodded. "I believe you." He leaned forward. "That light, the soul light. Do you think it's finished?" She shook her head. "No, I think it's resting. It gave too much of itself, but it's not gone." Rourke smiled. "Just like you." A few hours later, they reached the Ark ship. It hovered in space above a quiet moon, a massive structure of metal, glass, and energy. The ship docked, and medics escorted the trio inside. Rourke was treated for his wounds first. His arm was bandaged. His ribs were checked. They told him he needed rest. But he didn't leave Luma's side. The mother was moved to a healing chamber, where her body would be fully repaired over time. She insisted Luma stay with Rourke until then, and so they did. Together, days passed. The medics and scientists asked questions about the relic, the bone arrows, the light. Rourke didn't give them all the answers. Not yet. Not until they could. Prove they wanted to protect Luma, not use her. One evening, as the artificial sun dipped in the ship's sky dome, Rourke and Luma sat alone in a quiet garden chamber. Plants from across the galaxy bloomed around them. For the first time in a long while, there was peace. "Do you miss your home?" he asked her. Luma nodded slowly. "Sometimes, but it's not there anymore." He looked at her, and now, she smiled softly. "Now I have you." He looked away, his throat tight. "You've been through so much." "So have you," she said. "But you never gave up." He chuckled. "There were moments I wanted to." She held out the soul light. "You should hold it." "I can't," he said. "It only responds to you." "Maybe," she said. "But I wanted to know you matter too." He hesitated, then gently took it. The stone warmed in his palm. It didn't glow like before, but it felt alive. A soft pulse. A gentle hum. He smiled. "It's like it remembers." She leaned against his side. "It does." They sat in silence for a while. Then Luma asked, "Do you think I'll ever be normal again?" He looked at her. "You're not normal. And that's not a bad thing. You're special, and special doesn't mean alone." "I don't want to be alone," she whispered. "You won't be," he said. "Not as long as I'm here." She looked up at him, her silver eyes shining. "I love you." His heart nearly stopped. He swallowed hard. "I love you too, kid." The soul light pulsed once brighter, and somewhere deep in the Ark ship, ancient systems blinked to life, recognizing a signal, a pattern. The galaxy had changed, again, because of one girl, and the man who chose to protect her, not for power, not for profit, but because she called him Dad, and he became more than a soldier. He became family.